Good day everyone. Today we're going to discuss the first lesson under semifinal coverage in the subject assessment and evaluation in social science. So the first lesson here is the type of objective test. But before anything else, let's define what do we mean by objective tests. So objective tests are questions whose answers are either correct or incorrect. So ito yung mga test na kung saan ang mga examinees, yung mga students have only a limited set of options or choices. Okay? And kapag nag-administer tayo ng objective test, naiiwasan natin yung pagiging subjective or yung dito na papasok yung pagiging favoritism ni teacher at saka yung pagiging bias. Okay? Ito yung mga test na isa lang talaga yung sagot. For example, multiple choice, matching type, true or false, and so much more. Okay? Moving on, there are two types of objective tests. We have the supply test and the selective type of test, okay, or the selection type. When we say supply type, ito yung mga test na kung saan the student constructs his or her own answer to each question, meaning to say, from the word itself na supply, okay, pupunan nila, sila ang magsasagot, mag-iisip sila or magko-construct sila ng sarili nilang idea para sagutan yung certain question. And then when we say selection type, from the word itself, select, pipili ang mga estudyante dun sa choices kung ano yung tamang sagot. Okay? Ganun lang yung pagkakaiba ng supply type at saka selection type. Okay, moving on, let's try to discuss the supply type of objective test. Okay, sa supply type of objective test, there are several types. Okay, we have the completion drawing type, completion statement type, correction type, identification type, simple recall type, and short explanation type. Okay, so isa-isahin natin sila. So first, we have the completion drawing type. Okay, what do we mean by completion drawing type? It's an incomplete drawing that is presented to the students and the student has to complete. Okay, for example, in the following food web, draw arrow lines indicating which organisms are consumers and which are producers. So, ang completion drawing type, ito yung mga usually nakikita natin sa libro ng mga kinder, ng mga elementary, na kung saan merong isang drawing and then, hindi siya kumpleto, meron siyang itetrace na mga bata. Okay? That is completion drawing type. Kailangan nilang itrace yun para mabuo yung image. Okay? Next, we have completion statement type. It's an incomplete statement that is presented to the student and the student has to complete it by filling in the blank. An example of completion type is like this. The capital city of the Philippines is blank. Okay? So I know you are all familiar with completion type tests or completion statement type of objective test. Next, we have the correction type. It's a sentence with underlined word or phrase that is presented to the students, which the student has to replace to make it right. Okay, for example, listen. Change the underlined word or phrase to make each of the following statements correct. Write your answer on the space before each number. Okay, so ganito. May blanco before the number, okay? The theory of evolution was popularized by Gregor Mendel. The underlined word is Gregor Mendel. Okay, so ang gagawin ng student, kailangan niyang i-identify kung yung naka-underline na word ay tama or hindi. Kasi kung mali yun, kailangan niyang palitan. Okay, correction type. Papalitan ni student. Number 2, another example. Anthropology is the study of social life, social change, and the social causes and consequences of human behavior. The underlined word there is anthropology. Okay, so these are examples of correction type. Next type of supply type is the identification type. Okay, I know you are all familiar with identification type of test. Okay, hindi to nawawala sa assessment tool na ginagamit ng mga teachers. So what do we mean by identification type? It's a brief description that is presented to the student and the student has to identify what it is or ano yung nire-refer ng description. Okay, so for example, to what does each of the following refer? Write your answer on the blank before each number. Number 1, a flat representation of all curved surfaces of the earth. Number 2, the transmission of parents' characteristics and traits to their offsprings. So the student needs to identify kung ano yung nire-refer nung statement. Okay, identification type. Next, we have simple recall type. Okay, what do we mean by this? It's a direct question that is presented to the student to answer using a word or a phrase. Okay, for example, what is the product of two negative numbers? Another example, who is the national hero of the Philippines? Sir, ano ba ang pinagkaiba ng identification type dun sa simple recall type? So basically speaking, sa identification type, it's a phrase, it's a description, okay? Para siyang naging definition type. Sa simple recall type naman, usually nag-i-start siya sa art of questioning. For example, what, where, when, who, ganun. So, more on questioning yung pagkaka-state sa simple recall type. Next, we have short explanation type. Okay, this is somehow similar to essay but it requires a short answer. Okay, shorter answer sa short explanation type. For example, explain in a complete sentence why the Philippines was not really discovered by Magellan. Okay, so sasagot si student dito sa tanong na to pero kailangan niya lang iksian. Okay, direct yung kanyang pagsagot. Hindi niya na kailangan gumawa ng introduction, hindi na kailangan ng conclusion. Direct to the point na dapat siyang sumagot. Okay? Short explanation type. Moving on to other type of objective tests, we have the selection type. Okay, ano naman yung mga type of tests na kasali sa selection type? We have arrangement type, grouping type, matching type, multiple choice type, alternate response type, key list test, and interpretive exercise. Okay, so the first type under selection type is arrangement type. Okay, is this your first time to hear this type of test? I know, hindi. Kasi when we say arrangement type, these are terms or objects that are to be arranged by the students in a specified order. So basically speaking, arrangement, kailangan lang nilang ayusin na magkakasunod yung isang item na ibibigay sa kanya. For example, arrange the following events chronologically by writing the letters A, B, C, D, E on the spaces provided. Okay, so nandito yung Glorious Revolution, American Revolution, Puritan Revolution, Russian Revolution, and the French Revolution. So ang gagawin lang dito ni student, kailangan niya lang pagsunod-sunurin yung sequence ng events and then ilalagay niya lang yung letters na A hanggang letter E. Okay? Kapag A, yun yung naunang event. And then yung E naman yung last event. Another example, arrange the following planets according to their nearness to the Sun by using numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have Pluto, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. So, ang gagawin lang ni student, i-arrange niya lang yung mga planet according sa kalapit niya or according sa pagkalapit niya sa Sun. Ano ba yung pinakamalapit na planeta sa Sun? So, i-arrange lang ni student ito by using numbers. Okay? So, number 1, yung pinakamalapit, and then yung number 5, yung malayo planeta sa Sun. Okay? So, that is arrangement type of test. Next, we have matching type. Oh, I know you are all familiar with matching type. Okay, when we say matching type, it's a list of numbered items that are related to a list of letter choices. Okay. So example, match the country in column 1 with its capital in column 2. Write letters only. Okay, so mag-flash ako ng example dito sa may gilid. So this is an example of matching type. For example, sa number 1, Philippines. What is the capital of the Philippines? It's Manila. Okay, so letter D. Pipili lang si student ng sagot sa column 2. Okay, so dito sa column 1, ang nakalagay dito or ang category na nasa column 1 ay mga countries. And then sa column 2, ito naman yung mga capital ng bawat countries na na-indicate sa column 1. Okay, so next we have multiple choice type of test. I know you are all familiar with this also. This type contains a question, a problem, or unfinished sentence followed by several responses. Example, the study of values is A, axiology, B, epistemology, C, logic, D, metaphysics. So, pipili lang dito si student ng sagot. Okay? Next, we have alternate response type. Okay, baka hindi kayo familiar. Sir, ano yung alternate response type? Basically speaking, that is true or false. Okay? It's a test wherein there are only two possible answers to the question. Okay? And then, the true or false format is a form of alternative response type. Okay? Meron din kasing variations ang true or false. Pwedeng yes or no, agree, disagree, right and wrong. Okay? Example, write true if the statement is true and false if it is false. Number 1, Lapu-Lapu was the first Asian to repulse European colonizers in Asia. Number 2, Magellan's expedition to the Philippines led to the first circumnavigation of the globe. Number 3, the early Filipinos were uncivilized before the Spanish conquest of the archipelago. Number 4, the Arabs introduced Islam in southern Philippines. So basically speaking, the students just need to write true or false sa mga statement. Okay? Okay, next we have Killis test. Okay, medyo bago to sa atin. Ewan ko kung na-try nyo na yung ganitong type of test. Kasi ako, during my elementary, high school, and college days, hindi ko to nasubukan. Okay? So, a Killis test, it's a test wherein the student has to examine paired concepts based on a specified set of criteria. Example, examine the paired items in column 1 and column 2. On the blank before each number, write A. So, isusulat daw ang letter A if the item in column 1 is an example of the item in column 2. Letter B naman ang isusulat if the item in column 1 is a synonym of the item in column 2. Letter C, if the item in column 2 is an opposite of the item in column 1. And letter D, if items in column 1 and 2 are not related in any way. Okay, so medyo tricky yung ganitong type of test. Medyo malilito ang student kapag ganito. So sabi dito, A ang isulat mo kapag daw yung nakalagay sa column 1 ay example nung nasa column 2. B naman daw kapag yung item sa column 1 ay synonym nung nasa column 2. And then letter C kapag opposite daw ni column 2 yung nakalagay kay column 1. And letter D kapag hindi naman sila related sa isa't isa. Okay? So I will flash an example of Killis test here. Okay, so this is an example of Killis test. Next type of test, we have interpretive exercise. If you are not familiar with this type of test, that's impossible. Okay, maybe hindi lang natin alam kung ano yung tawag dun sa type of test na yun. So when we say interpretive exercise, it's a form of multiple choice type of test that can assess higher cognitive behaviors. It provides students some information or data followed by a series of questions on that information. In responding to the questions in an interpretive exercise, the students have to analyze, interpret, or apply the material provided, like a map, excerpt of a story, passage of a poem, data matrix, table, or cartoon. Example, examine the data on child labor in Europe during the period immediately after the Industrial Revolution in the continent. Answer the questions given below by encircling the letter of your choice. So dito sa interpretive exercise, usually magbibigay dito ng pwedeng graph or ng table si teacher and then i-interpret yun ni student. Okay, so as you can see dito sa example na ipapakita ko, meron tayong table dito. It's a table of child labor in the years right after ng Industrial Revolution na nangyari sa Europe. Okay? So, dito sa isang column, andito yung year. And then sa pangalawang column naman, ito yung number of child laborers. Okay? So, basically, ang gagawin lang ni student, masasagutan niya yung mga questions base dun sa pagkaka-interpret niya sa graph. Okay? So, sa interpretive exercise, multiple choice din ang kanyang format. Okay, so for example, number 1, the employment of child labor was greatly used in letter A, 1750, B, 1760, C, 1770, letter D, 1780. Okay, so masasagutan to ni student sa pamamagitan ng pagtingin dun sa table. Okay, anong taon daw nagkaroon ng maraming bilang ng child laborers? So, dito meron tayong makikita na 5,000. That is in 1770. Therefore, the answer here is letter C. Okay, 1770. So, ganito lang ang interpretive exercise. Kailangan lang tingnan ni student yung binigay ni teacher, or those are the types of tests under selection type of objective test. Now, let's move on sa essay test. Okay, hindi na to part nung objective test. Okay, when we say essay test kasi, magpo-fall na siya under subjective type of test. Okay, kasi dito, magkakaroon na ng iba't ibang opinion, iba't ibang answer ang students. Okay, so let me define what is essay. It's a type of test that presents a problem or question, and the student needs to compose a response in paragraph form using his or her own words or ideas. Okay, sa essay test, meron tayong two types. We have restricted and we have extended. Okay, napakadali lang i-differentiate itong dalawa. When we say restricted, from the word itself pa lang na restrict, okay, limitado. Okay? And then sa extended naman, extend, ibig sabihin may freedom. Okay? Kahit saan pwedeng sumagot si student. Okay? Kahit ano yung gusto niyang isulat dun sa essay niya, pwede. Okay, when we say brief or restricted, it's a form of essay test that requires a limited amount of writing or requires that a given problem be solved in a few sentences. Okay, for example, why did early Filipino revolts fail? Cite and explain in 2 reasons. Okay, so dun pa lang, si student sasagot siya pero direct na siyang sasagot. Sasagutin niya agad yung question ni teacher. And 2 rason lang yung kailangan niyang ibigay. Okay? Unlike sa extended na it's a form of essay test that requires a student to present his answer in several paragraphs or pages of writing. Okay? It gives students more freedom to express ideas and opinions and use synthesizing skills to change knowledge into a creative idea. Okay, for example, explain your position on the restoration of death penalty in the Philippines. Okay, so sa phrase pa lang na to, si student, marami na siyang pwedeng ilagay or marami na siyang pwedeng maisulat. Okay, so extended. So these are the 2 types of essay test. According to Reyes and Gay, the essay test is appropriate to use when learning outcomes cannot be adequately measured by objective test items. So gagamitin mo lang ang essay test kapag yung objectives mo ay hindi kayang ma-measure ng paggamit ng objective type of test. Okay? And nevertheless, all levels of cognitive behaviors can be measured with the use of the essay test. Yun naman ang maganda sa paggamit ng essay test. Na-measure niya pa rin yung different levels of cognitive domain. Ano ba yung mga levels of cognitive domain? So, i-recall natin, we have the knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, and then synthesis and evaluation. So, na-measure naman daw sa essay itong 6 na levels na to. So, for example, sa knowledge level, explain how Siddhartha Gautama became Buddha. Okay, knowledge level lang siya. And then, under comprehension level, what does it mean when a person had crossed the Rubicon? Okay, comprehension level. Application level, cite 3 instances showing the application of the law of supply and demand. Okay, and then analysis level, analyze the annual budget of your college as to categories of funds, sources of funds, major expenditures, and the needs of your college. Analysis. Synthesis, discuss the significance of the people power revolution in the restoration of democracy in the Philippines. And then evaluation level, are you in favor of the political administration of President Rodrigo Duterte? Justify your answer. So those are the examples of essay under different level of cognitive domain. Moving on to the next part of this discussion, we have the preparation of table of specifications, also known as TOS. Okay, so ang TOS, it stands for Table of Specifications, and the Table of Specification is considered as the blueprint of the teacher in constructing a test for classroom use. So mahalaga ang TOS sa teachers because of 2 reasons. First, it helps the teachers to decide what to include in the test. Okay? Ano ba yung mga dapat isali ni teacher dun sa test niya or sa exam niya? Ano ba yung dapat mga coverage? And ano yung mga dapat na hindi niya na isama? Okay? Next, it helps the teacher to determine how much weight to give for each topic covered and the objective to be tested. Okay? Gaano ba kabigat yung items na gagawin ni teacher at saan ba magfo-focus yung mga questions. Okay? There are steps in preparing TOS. Okay? First step na kailangan nyong gawin kapag kayo ay magpre-prepare ng TOS, kailangan nyong ilista. Okay? You need to list down the topics covered for the inclusion in the test. Ano ba yung mga topics na ipapatest mo? For example, sa prelim, ang coverage ay chapter 1 hanggang chapter 3. Therefore, yun ang magiging content ng iyong exam. Okay? I-list down mo yung mga topics. And then next step, second step, determine the objectives to be assessed by the test. Okay? Babalikan pa rin natin yung objective ng isang test. Okay? I mentioned to you before na napaka-importante ng objective when it comes to constructing a test, constructing instructional materials. Okay? Kailangang mag-reflect or kailangang mag-match yung inyong test dun sa objective. Ano ba yung objective mo? Ano ba yung itatest mo sa mga bata? Okay? Next, specify the number of days or hours spent for teaching a particular topic. Okay, ilang number of days mo bang tinuro yung isang chapter at ilang oras mo siyang itinuro sa klase? So, kailangan mong ma-specify, okay? Mag-allot ka ng time kung ilang oras mo siya tinuro. The fourth step, determine percentage allocation of the test items for each of the topics covered. Okay, this is the formula to be applied. Percentage for a topic equals total number of days or total number of hours spent divided by the total number of days or hours spent teaching the topic. So, for example, ito, Mrs. Sid Garcia utilized 10 hours for teaching the unit on pre-Spanish Philippines. She spent 2 hours in teaching the topic Early Filipinos and Their Society. What percentage of test items should she allocate for the aforementioned topic? So, ganito lang yan. 10 hours yung ginamit ni teacher para ituro yung pre-Spanish lesson. And then 2 hours yung ginamit niya para ituro yung isang lesson which is Early Filipinos and Their Society. So, ang gagawin lang, i-divide lang yung 2 divided by 10 times 100 equals 20%. So, yun yung formula para makuha natin yung percentage for a certain topic. Okay? I-divide mo lang yung number of hours or days mo kailan siya tinuro dun sa total number. Okay? Then, i-times mo siya sa 100. And the fifth step, determine the number of items to construct for each topic. Okay? This can be done by multiplying the percentage allocation for each topic by the total number of items to be constructed. For example, yung kay Mrs. Sid. Mrs. Sid Garcia decided to prepare a 50 items test on the unit Pre-Spanish Philippines. How many items should she write for the topic mentioned in the step number 4? Okay, so 50 items ang gustong gawin ni Mrs. Sid Garcia na test. Okay, kung ilang items yung kanyang test. Okay, so paano natin ma-determine kung ilang items ang gagawin natin para dun sa topic or sa lesson na Pre-Spanish Philippines? Okay, ganito lang yan. 50 items, yung total number ng ginawang test ni Mrs. Sid, i-times niya lang sa nakuha natin kanina na 0.20. And then, ang maging resulta or the answer is 10. Okay? Therefore, 10 items ang gagawin ni Mrs. Sid na questions under Pre-Spanish Philippines. The last step, distribute the number of items to the objectives to be tested. The number of items allocated for each objective depends on the degree of importance attached by the teacher to it. So, I will flash an example of my TOS, okay, in the subject results, life, and works during the prelim, okay? So, dito sa may pinaka-side, makikita nyo yung topics, and then i-list down doon kung ano yung mga subject. Okay, for example, sa Chapter 1, Introduction to the Rizal Course and Rizal Law, Republic Act number 1425. And then, ilang oras ko siya tinuro? 4 hours. Yung suma total ng prelim ko ay 12 hours. Okay, so dinivide ko lang yung 4 hours divided by 12 times 100. The result is 33.3%. Ganon din yung ginawa ko sa pangalawa at sa pangatlo. And then, madidistribute ko na siya dun sa cognitive level. Dito na yung remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Okay, so, kailangan mo lang i-analyze yung mga question mo. Kung yung question mo ba ay magpo-fall under remembering ba siya, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And then sa may dulo, yung item placement, dito mo ilalagay yung mga items kung saan matatagpuan itong mga questions under chapter 1. Okay? So, para hindi kayo mahirapan, usually ang ginagawa ng iba is magkakasunod na. For example, sa items 1 to 33, lahat ng questions dyan ay tungkol sa Rizal course and Rizal law. And then yung 34 to 75, ang mga questions dun ay tungkol sa Philippine condition in the 19th century. And then yung 76 to 100, yun ay mga questions na magpo-fall under Rizal's life, his family, childhood memories, and early education. Pero yung ibang teacher, ang ginagawa nila, kinakalat-kalat nila. So, matrabaho lang kasi pag ganun. Kasi, imagine, dito sa item placement, isa-isahin mo, ilalagay yung 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, until 100. Okay? So, mas madali kung sunod-sunod na lang. Okay? Pero pareho namang tama. Kahit anong gawin doon sa dalawa, okay lang. Okay? Now, we're moving on to the general guidelines in writing test items. According to Irishan, there are 5 basic guidelines in writing test items. So, what are those? First, avoid wording that is ambiguous and confusing. So, ibig sabihin, huwag kang gagamit ng words sa test mo or sa question na masyadong ambiguous, meaning to say, masyado siyang vague or hindi naiintindihan ng estudyante. Unfamiliar word. Okay? Huwag kang gagamit ng ganun. Pangalawa, use appropriate vocabulary and sentence structure. Okay? Yung kaya lang sa level ng student mo, yung naiintindihan nila, okay? Huwag ka gagamit ng mga words na hindi nila alam or first time nilang ma-encounter. And then, the sentence structure also, maging observant ka din sa pagko-construct ng sentence. Kasi minsan, kapag mali yung construction ng sentence, minsan nagiging mali yung pagkakaintindi ng estudyante. Kaya usually, mali din yung sagot ng bata. Pangatlo, keep questions short and to the point. Meaning to say, maiksi lang dapat ang question mo and make sure na on point na siya or direct to the point. Okay? Huwag mo nang habaan. Okay? Number 4, write items that have one correct answer. Oh, this is true. Kailangan isa lang yung sagot mo. Unless yung test mo ay choose the best answer, na lahat ay tama pero merong isang best. Pero kung hindi naman choose the best answer, make sure na isa lang ang sagot. Okay? And then lastly, do not provide clues to the answer. Okay? Huwag niyong gawing trip yung paggawa ng test item or huwag niyong laruin. Kasi I remember when I was in first year college, okay, psychology subject, meron ako isang professor, ang ginawa niya, sa options or sa choices na A, B, C, D, yung tatlo doon may period. Letter A, period, B, period, C, period. Yung letter D, walang period. And you know what? Yung mga walang period, yun ang sagot. And then I have one classmate na naka-notice doon sa ginawa niya, okay? Pero hindi pinagsabi, sinolo. Therefore, ang resulta, isa lang ang mataas, okay? And then, the rest of us, mababa dun sa exam, okay? Wag niyong gagawin. Wag niyong pagtripan yung choices, even the question, okay? So, moving on, let's see the criteria for preparing test directions, okay? Pati sa pag-construct ng direction sa any type of test, kailangang meron tayong guideline or kailangan maayos yung pagkakakonstruct. Okay. You know what? Test directions are very important sa kahit na anong type of test yan. Kasi yung inability of the student na intindihin yung direction mo ay naapektuhan niya na rin yung validity of test mo. So, remember, sa validity, dapat ma-measure natin yung ano ba yung dapat nating ma-measure. Okay? So, kailangan yung directions mo sa test ay complete, clear or klaro, concise, maiksi lang dapat. Okay? And kailangan aware din ng students kung ano ba yung expected sa kanila. Okay? Kailangan aware sila na ano ba yung coverage ng exam or ng test, ano ba yung passing score ng test mo, and ano ang type of test ba yung gagamitin mo. Okay? And yung method of answering, kailangan simple lang din. Kung kailangan lang ba nilang bilugan or kailangan ba nilang isulat yung tamang sagot before the number. Ito yung mga criteria na dapat nyong tandaan. Okay? Assume that the examiners and the examiner know the objective test. Okay? Ano ba yung purpose kung bakit mo sila itatest and ano yung coverage ng test mo? Okay, anong type of test yung gagamitin mo. Pangalawa, in writing directions, use a clear, succinct style. Be as explicit as possible but avoid long drawn-out explanations. Okay, make your directions very simple. Okay, kailangan direct na yung pagkaka-instruct mo sa kanila. Huwag mo nang pahabain. Okay, there's no need for that. And then number 3, emphasize the more important directions and key activities through the use of underlining, italics, or different type, size, or style. Okay, for example, kapag sa true or false, di ba? Write T if the statement is true and F if the statement is false. So, anong i-emphasize mo dun? Yung letter T at saka yung F. Kailangang i-capitalize mo sila sa direction mo, or kung ayaw mo naman, pwede mo silang i-italic or pwede mo ring i-bold. Okay? Pakapalan mo yung letter T and F. I-emphasize mo kung ano ba yung more important dun sa directions mo para aware din ang mga estudyante. Okay? And then, fourth, criteria, field or pretest the directions to identify possible misunderstandings and inconsistencies and gather suggestions for improvement. So, as much as possible, pwede mo palang i-pretest yung mga bata, okay? Parang pilot testing, i-sample mo muna, parang trial, okay? Kung naiintindihan nila yung direction mo sa isang test, okay? Pwedeng ganun. And then, keep directions for different forms, subsections, or booklets as uniform as possible. Okay, dito tayo sa format, kailangang maayos din yung format ng iyong test. Okay, kailangang magkaka-align sila, kailangang there is a uniformity or pare-pareho sila. Okay, and the last one, where necessary or helpful, give practice items before each regular section. Okay, importante na meron tayong trial, especially kung mga nasa kinder and elementary yung mga estudyante. Para yung mga unfamiliar dun sa instruction or dun sa direction mo ay makabisado nila. Okay? So, those are the guidelines in constructing test directions. So, that ends our discussion for this lesson. I hope you have learned something. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day ahead.